him today. Mr. Gideon Saar, the floor is yours.
צהריים טובים לכולם.
Good afternoon, one and all. President Trump's decision last night, about 18 months after entering office, to pull out from the nuclear agreement with Iran has completed his change of attitude vis-à-vis his predecessor, and now Israel and the United States are on the same page. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump are now on the same page, which is exactly unlike the situation in the past with the previous administration. The current administration does not view Iran as a partner in this region, but rather as a country that should be dealt with, dealing with its aspirations, its dangerous actions, in order to stabilize it. The American president has also emphasized in his address last night to prevent Iran from obtaining weapons of mass destruction and attacking cities. It is very important as part of the nuclear race. However, Israel must also prepare for various other possible scenarios, including one where, in order to prevent Iran from obtaining weapons of mass destruction, we will have to take action. This is the time to congratulate the U.S. administration for taking a decision and standing strong against a state that is threatening the security of the world. We must back up and support Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for his constant leadership in the battle against Iran. The Prime Minister has identified this threat to its full severity and continued to counter it, even at times when the conditions were not simple. This combination of Iran and Syria and the economic crisis in Iran is creating an explosive situation, but also grants us an opportunity. Iran has problems in several places at once, and it is overstretched in various theaters. The strategic understanding between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is a source of strength in a conflict that in crisis that may be long-lived. The matters in Iran have not quieted down, and it is quite comprehensive, even if it seems on the back burner. To reinstate and reimpose the US sanctions that may bring about a worsening of the current economic crisis in Iran. However, the conditions for success, both in the nuclear sense and in the battle against having Iran base itself in Syria, is to place red lines and set clear objectives and to put in place the methods for reaching those goals consistently and permanently. Iran is setting strategic goals for itself. It is patient in its efforts to achieve them. It is able to absorb and contain, and it can tactically maneuver itself in order to reach its goals. The public discourse in its reaction or in the revenge, the Iranian revenge that are anticipated vis-à-vis the attacks from Israel misses the point. We must focus the discussion on the policy required to thwart Iranian efforts, both in nuclear and on our borders. The question we must ask ourselves is, what kind of strategic reality would we want to create, and what are we seeking to prevent? What is the victory snapshot that we would like to see, and how do we reach it? Over-focusing or retaliation may actually divert us from the actual goal. Aside from its nuclear aspirations, Iran is also striving to change the strategic balance on our borders by creating power levers over us in case of a future conflict. And so it has helped Hezbollah in its intensification efforts, and in this channel, the Hezbollah has reached several achievements since the years that have passed since the 2016 Second Lebanon War. And now the Iranian efforts are focused on two axes. The first, building factories for precise and accurate missiles in Syria and Lebanon, missiles that can attack very accurately military bases, energy and infrastructure facilities in Israel. And the damage of such arming will be very significant in any future conflict. The second axis is having advanced warfare go into Syria and building a direct threat from the Syrian air territories to Israel. And these are two axes that are part of the same strategic move by Iran, and one should not separate between them. It is Iran's aim to create a top quality attack against Israel's military and economic home front. These two axes are Iran is advanced in both of these two axes, despite Israel's attempts to thwart it. Aside from other arms of Iran in Gaza and Lebanon alongside Syria, is designed to create a balance of powers that will disrupt Israel's ability to go into conflict with Iran over the nuclear issue in future. Israel's willingness to confront Iran in this area is not an obvious choice. Begin's doctrine has embodied the determination to stop the Arabs around us from gaining nuclear weapons. In 1981, in Iraq and in Syria in 2007. However, Israel was not as determined to thwart the intensification of its neighboring countries when it comes to conventional weapons. And so Hezbollah has become much stronger. And now the Iranian move meant that Israel cannot allow to have such arms built around it, and we must set red lines for the armament of our enemies and for having certain systems and certain weapons. In such a situation, we must ask ourselves, and Israel should ask itself, what is the operative model for thwarting the Iranian efforts? To date, Israel has been active in the war between wars, which had a surgical nature and has led to some achievements. However, we have not managed to stop Iran or steer Iran off of its track. And perhaps this channel of operation has exhausted itself, and at the end of the day, Hezbollah and their attempts to become stronger have been fruitful despite Israel's efforts. Assuming that we know what the target is, we must now ask ourselves how to get there, how best to attain this goal. I believe we should change the equation by addressing the enemy's desire. In the civil war years in Syria, there was a disagreement in Israel over what is the most or the best sort of end scenario as Israel sees it. The opinion that I expressed at the time, and quite consistently, was that if Iran is the most dangerous enemy of Israel's, then having its ally, Assad in Syria, collapse is Israel's interest and is better than other scenarios, even those that have to do with uncertainty. Israel was not involved in the internal war in Syria, and rightly so. But either way, Assad's regime, in Iran's point of view, in Russia's point of view, and also in Hezbollah's point of view, is an asset. Both of them have invested so much over the last few years in order to make sure it survives and in order to ensure Assad's regime's survival. Setting this threat, posing a threat upon this strategic move as a response to what is happening in Syria may be a very efficient tool in the thwarting thereof. And therefore, Israel should say clearly and loudly that if Iran should persist in its attempts to create a new strategic equation from Syria, this will endanger Assad's regime. And the outcome of such a move may be the collapse of Assad's regime. And as a result, and consequently, so long as Iran continues to proceed in its plan, then we will attack regime targets in Syria. And we must also put our money where our mouth is. As long as our threat seems more reliable, so the probability to actually act upon our statements will lessen. If the steps taken by Iran will endanger Syrian regime, then that will create a dissonance between them, as well as between Russia and Iran. The price of war is astronomical to all parties involved, and it doesn't look like there's any player who is interested in war. A war can also be the outcome of miscalculation, an error in judging the steps to be taken by the other party. Perhaps there are limited conflicts that are more than just accurate fighting and less than a big war, but these events do cost. The Iranian threat is the most significant threat to Israel's security today. And an important component in our ability to cope with the Iranian threat is unity within. We must set aside political rivalries and disputes over other issues in order to create first and foremost the utmost unity surrounding the necessity to address this threat. In the 70 years of our existence, we have grappled with far greater and more complex threats, and we have come through. And I am certain of our ability to withstand this threat too. Thank you very much.